Hey, and welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR, and we've got a lot to talk about going on in the Big Ten, and it looks a little different because this is a recorded show and some things are changing over on this channel. I wanted to let you know about it before we get into the show, but essentially, here's what's going on. We created the College Huddle channel with the expectation that we would be able to give you one show every single day of the week. However, we did start that way. Things have since then fallen off. I was supposed to do a national show that just never really caught steam. We were supposed to have an SEC show, a Big 12 show, and while those did do well for a little while, it got harder and harder to produce them on a weekly basis. And so instead of trying to do something that really wasn't working all that well because things were being inconsistent, we weren't really getting enough guests, things like that, I want to just go ahead and take this channel back to the Big Ten Huddle and let it be Big Ten centric, with the idea that sometimes you're going to get shows that are probably just me, JR, by myself, and just talking about different news and notes from the Big Ten. You might get shows with me and Zach talking football. You might get shows with me and casual Big Ten. Kent talking basketball. Kent said he even wants to start talking some more football, so he might even come on some shows and do that. And I'm also going to do my best to try and get guests and different people on shows with me to talk about things, not just with their team, like we say all the time here at the Big Ten Huddle, things about every single team, getting every single fan base talking about them, what's going on, getting their thoughts, getting their comments. So we are going to start doing 5 shows a week on just the Big Ten, and here is how the schedule is going to be starting out. Things could change. You guys let me know what you think if you want things to change, but here's the way things are going to start out. You're going to get a recorded show every Monday at 6 a.m., just like this one right here. You're going to get a Tuesday live show at 9 p.m., same thing Wednesday, 9 p.m. Those will stay being football episode, basketball episode, and then you're also going to get a show on Friday morning at 6 a.m. and then a show on Saturday morning at 6 a.m. One thing that I always wanted more of was more weekend sports content, but so many people work during the week or and they don't want to make content on Saturdays. So I thought, well, I'm going to go ahead and start doing that. So I'm going to start bringing you guys an episode on Saturday mornings at 6 a.m. Big Ten centric. I'm sure once the season gets started, things will change, things will adapt a little bit. Who knows? We might do a Big Ten preview every Saturday morning, or we might just do like a Big Ten recap every Saturday night. We'll try to figure that out as we go. If you guys have any thoughts on that, please let me know. But my guarantee to you is that every single one of these episodes will last at least 30 minutes. Sometimes if it's just me on the show like this, I can't guarantee I'm going to go an hour every single time. I have thoughts on many different topics, but I don't know if I have that many thoughts on them. So I'm going to do my best to try and go an hour for you guys, but I'm going to guarantee every single episode, long form of these podcasts are going to go at least 30 minutes for you, no shorter than that. And it's not going to be a whole bunch of ads and stuff like that. You might get one or two ads here and there, but at the end of the day, you're not going to get a bunch of ads. This is going to be me straight talking Big Ten, things like that are going on, which I do want to start with the Big Ten. Obviously, I want to start with my top 10 things that happened at Big Ten Media Days this year. As you know, or as you might not know if you're just watching the channel, you don't follow me on social media, I was at Big Ten Media Days. I talked about it on the Tuesday show, so if you missed that one, you probably don't know, but I was at Big Ten Media Days. Things that I observed, things that I heard, things that I saw on social media, maybe I missed in person, but I saw them later on. There wasn't very many things I missed, but it always happens from time to time. I want to talk about the top 10 things that happened at Big Ten Media Days. Number 1, Kirk Cignetti's confidence in his team. Kirk Cignetti was asked about expectations for his team, and here's what he had to say. He says, I mean, you don't bring your kids up, Johnny, I want you to be 4th best. I want you to be 10th best. Bullshit. You want to be the best. We want to be the best. And so obviously he's talking about here, he wants his team to come out, perform, be the best in the Big Ten. Now, obviously those are large expectations. This is Indiana. Indiana is not a powerhouse in the Big Ten by any means, but Kirk Cignetti, he came in talking about how his teams were picked second to last multiple times in his career, coming into a new coming in as a new coach for a team, and their conference, they were picked second to last multiple times. And guess what? he came in and he went to the conference championship game both those years. And so he's not given the, guarantee that he's going to be in the Big Ten championship game, but that's what he expects from his team, is that they're going to contend for Big Ten titles. Now, do I believe that's going to happen this year? I mean, they have a lot of really good group of five guys. I've been joking about it a little bit with the Ohio podcast guys that I appear on their show on Sundays. They've been joking with me about it being like a G5 All-Star team. And we're having the debate now, what could a G5 All-Star team do in a Power 2 conference? I seriously think we're going to find out this year. You have the quarterback, Curtis Rourke. You have a ton of guys coming in from James Madison. Obviously, you don't have, some of the best guys in the G5 last year, but you do have a lot of players that performed really, really well. A lot of them from James Madison, because that's where Kirk Cinetti came from. But this is going to be really interesting to see what they can do. And I got to be honest, I love the fire. I love the confidence from Kirk Cinetti. It's contagious. It's crazy, but it's entertaining, and I love it. I can't wait to see him in this year. Tony Petitti's Big Ten map commercial plans. Here's what what Tony Petitti had to say about the Big Ten map commercial. Obviously, I can't play that for you. Unfortunately, it's copyrighted. But if you know the commercial I'm talking about, it's the commercial that kind of spans over the Big Ten land, and all the logos and the schools start popping up. I mean, people love that, right? I love that commercial. But here's what he had to say. He said, "I learned very quickly in this job that there is a lot of passion around the Big Ten map commercial." Just go search it on Google if you don't know what it's called. So I would say to fans, we understand, we get that, so more to come. All right, you didn't give us anything concrete, but more to come leads me to believe there's most likely going to be some kind of Big Ten map commercial, and I love it. I'm all for it. I think it's going to be fantastic. I'm looking forward to it, and I think that if Tony Petitti can make this happen, that's fantastic. I could not be more excited that we're going to get another Big Ten map commercial, including USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington. I mean, are they going to remake it every single time? Like, we add Florida State, they're going to remake it for that? Or if we add, I don't know, Virginia, North Carolina, we going to remake it for that? Like, that kind of stuff would be hilarious. That would be awesome. And I would just love to see eventually there be 20 some teams in this commercial. That would be hilarious. All right. So a little bit more serious stuff here. Sherrone Moore's QB talk. All right, so Sherrone Moore was obviously asked about the QBs going into Big Ten Media Days, and he obviously wanted to talk about them, but he didn't want to give up who his starting quarterback was. So Sherrone Moore said this specifically about Jack Tuttle, who was the backup quarterback for pseudo backup quarterback. It's hard to delineate because Alex Orji was also was also coming in relief of JJ McCarthy last year. But I think it was pretty safe to say that the backup quarterback last year was Jack Tuttle. Anyway, here's what he had to say. Yeah, he's been great, man. He's been accurate. He's been throwing hard, throwing physical, fast, and it looks good. I don't know what throwing physical means. I guess like you just using your whole body with it. I don't know. If you know what that means, let me know. I'm sure, it's got something to do with Sherrone Moore's smash. That's what he loves. But he also continued to point out that, like, Tuttle has been in college for 6 years now. This is his 7th year of college football. And in those 6 years, he has played behind 2 top 10 picks in J.J. McCarthy and Michael Penix Jr. I'm sorry, I said 6 years. This is his 6th year that he's going into. But anyway, his point is that a lot of his time in college has spent being a backup to a top 10 pick, J.J. McCarthy and Michael Penix Jr. And so for him, he's saying, like, this guy's really, really good. And just because you don't play in front of a top 10 pick doesn't mean you're not good. I guess he didn't say he's really, really good. But he's saying that you are behind players who are really, really good. And so just because you didn't start in front of those players, that's not a knock on you. And so obviously the thought process is like, all right, well, he's hyping Jack Tuttle up. What's that mean for Alex Orji? And I think this is a really interesting comparison here because we didn't see Jack Tuttle start the opposite side of Alex Orji in the spring game because he was hurt. He wasn't able to play that game. So instead we saw Davis Warren, and Davis Warren was beginning to get a lot of love after that spring game, talking about, could he be the guy? He's got a better arm. He can throw the ball better, but Alex Orji has the athleticism, things like that. And so if you thought that Davis Warren had the arm to be able to take down Alex Orji, I would argue Jack Tuttle probably has a better arm, right? I mean, he's going into his 6th year of college football. Credit to what Sharon Moore said. He was backing up two very good players when he was at Indiana and when he was in Washington, or when he was at Michigan. However, he also never won the job. So is this a guy that's just a career lifer backup, or is this a guy that really he just has this undiscovered talent and he's not been able to really release it out there for everybody to see? I don't know. We'll see. I tend to believe we're still going to see Alex Orji as a starter. I mean, Michigan fans talk a lot about how he has the upside of Jalen Milroe. I think it was Harbaugh that said that last year. I mean, if you have the upside of Jalen Milroe with that athleticism and the ability to throw the ball, I think you have to start that guy. Now, do I think that Michigan is going to let him be Jalen Milroe? I don't think so. I think Michigan is going to be more reliant on the run, more committed to the run than maybe Alabama was last year, and I think they're going to be more willing to run Alex Orji than he was. I also don't think they're going to take as many deep shots down the field that Jalen Milroe does, and that's the thing about Jalen Milroe that I don't know if Alex Orji can do. I'm not saying he can't. I just don't know if he can do because we haven't seen him do it. Is throw the ball downfield. That's one area where Jalen Milroe, like as a passer, was able to do. He was able to throw the ball down the field really, really well. Can Alex Orji do that? I'm sure he's got a big arm, right? He's a big, strong guy. I'm sure he's got a big arm, but can he do it accurately? Can he do it with the right touch? We'll see. It's going to be really interesting, but those comments from Sharon Moore, those kind of struck me a little bit, and I was very interested in those. All right, number 4, James Franklin on sign stealing. All right, this was a really interesting thing, and I have a video from Tom Orr on Twitter. He actually was the one that took this, so go follow Tom Orr. He's a Buckeye beat writer if you want more Buckeye stuff. But
I don't think it's as significant as people think. I think the whole reason that this got changed is the whole sign stealing deal. I think that was a big reason why this rule got changed, and it doesn't really help that. I think a lot of people that passed the rule think it did. If you're running a no-huddle offense and you can talk to the quarterback, how do you get the information to the wideouts that are 53 yards apart from each other? You're still going to have to signal. So there may be more people that huddle than have in the past to avoid people stealing signs, but it doesn't really resolve that. For us, either way, we're happy with it. There are some challenges that you have on special teams because you can only have one guy on the field at once with it. And on special teams, you got a blend of people on the field. And you could have some changes throughout the game where you end up with 2 players on the field at the same time. So you got to be strategic about that. You got to be careful. But I think it's a good rule change. I'm glad it happened. But I think the whole reason the rule got changed is because of the sign stealing whole discussion. And I don't really feel like that resolves that whatsoever.
So the overall sentiment with the in-helmet communication change is that this prevents sign stealing, right? And that was one of the reasons why this rule was changed. And, nobody can really deny that. I mean, even Michigan fans were talking about like, oh, Connor Salians made them change the rules because he was so good at stealing signs. And I mean, stealing signs isn't against the rule. There's other things that were done that, Tony Petiti pointed out that he believed were against the rules. But anyway, that's not the point of what I'm getting at here. What I'm getting at here is that it's really interesting that we've actually had a coach now come out and say that he believes this whole in-helmet communication doesn't really change things with stealing signs. You're still going to have to be able to communicate things from the quarterback to the rest of the players, or you can communicate to the quarterback, but you still need to communicate to the rest of the players. Now, he is correct. You can huddle. That certainly can be a big part of it. But how many teams are going to want to huddle? If you're running a hurry-up offense, you're going to have to throw those signs out there and get them to your players in a quicker way than getting everybody around your quarterback. So it's really interesting to think about. I don't know if I completely believe it. I mean, far from me to tell James Franklin he's wrong. He obviously is living this stuff day in and day out much more than I am. But I do think that this new in-helmet communication is preventing sign stealing in some way shape, or form. I don't think it's just going to be mass pandemonium where it continues to happen. I think things are going to be different, and even just the difference of it all will probably stunt things and make things different for a little while. So interesting stuff there from James Franklin. Definitely something I want to monitor a little bit more this year. All right, Matt Rule just pisses Paul Feinbaum off, and I found this hilarious. Paul Feinbaum acted like he was big and bad going on ESPN or Get Up or whatever it was. Paul Feinbaum is such a clown. I mean, this guy is as Southern gets. He believes the SEC is impenetrable, and he just takes issue with anything any Big Ten coach says. Look at all the coaches he says things against. They're all Big Ten. All right. I mean, he hates the Big Ten. He loves the SEC. It's just the way things are, and so he's gonna have any opportunity. He's gonna find any opportunity he can to try and go against the Big Ten. Unfortunately, this just completely whiffed and was a complete miss, and Paul Feinbaum made himself look like a complete idiot, as he's done multiple times before in his career. But here's just one more. So take a look at what Paul Feinbaum said about what Matt Rule said.
I think 4 teams from this league should get in every year because this is the best league. This is the NFL of college football in my mind. It stretches from coast to coast, different time zones, different weather. That's not to diminish any other league. The SEC is amazing. These other leagues are great, but the challenge in the Big Ten is going to be really difficult.
So he says the Big Ten should just automatically get 4 teams in the playoff. Paul, what do you think of that?
Matt, stay in your lane, okay? Job 1, win enough games to get to some stupid bowl game. Don't worry about the big boys because you're not one of them. We saw what you did in the NFL. You were a complete disaster in Carolina. You somehow got this job in Nebraska, and you're talking like you belong at the table with Ohio State and Georgia. You don't. Just try to win maybe 6 games. Quit choking big games on the final play and leave the punditry to the professionals. Thank you.
This has been a public service announcement from Paul Feinbaum, and it absolutely lived up to everything we were.
I mean, it doesn't get much stupider than that. He tells Paul Feinbaum to stay, or Paul Feinbaum tells him to stay in his lane. Paul Feinbaum, you are talking to a head coach of a Big Ten conference. You know nothing about the Big Ten. You don't cover the Big Ten. He coaches in the Big Ten. Paul, stay in your lane. You're an idiot. He talks about how, Matt Rule, I mean, he just goes on and on and on about all the things here with Matt Rule. You're talking about like you're on Ohio State and Georgia's level. He never said that. He was asked a question about what do you think that the Big Ten should get, and he has actually played against Big Ten competition. He actually knows it. Paul Feinbaum watches it on TV. He doesn't know Big Ten competition. He doesn't know how hard it is to go against the teams like Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and now Oregon and USC. He has no idea. He's just saying anything and everything he possibly can. And then the whole line at the end about like, leave it to the professionals. Paul Feinbaum, do you realize how you got your career? Do you realize the professional that you are? You got your career because you had a call-in show where stupid Southern people came on and talked about, I poisoned the trees. And Paul Feinbaum, you listen to me. You didn't do anything to earn your fame or what people think about you. The only thing you did is you sat behind a microphone and made fun of people when they called into your show, and they were too stupid to realize that you were making fun of them. And so at the end of the day, Paul, like, if anybody is a professional here, it's Matt Rule. It's not you. You are a beneficiary of somebody who is willing to talk against the Big Ten because you will do anything for $1 and you grew up in the South, and that's what ESPN wants. ESPN wants anybody to say anything against the Big Ten. So Paul Feinbaum, screw off, stop being a clown, and let's just play this clip. This is my favorite clip of Paul Feinbaum.
Really, I don't really know what you're good at. Like you predicted that Coach Saban was done. That didn't happen. You basically said Miley Cyrus stinks, and she's still going.
Yeah.
Did you see him when he said, "I don't even know what you're good at"? And Paul just looked down like he he had no answer for it because he had an SEC coach saying something against him. Like, oh, I can't say anything against Lane Kiffin. Like, Lane Kiffin, he's an SEC coach. I can't say anything against him. So anyway, Paul Feinbaum, if you are anybody who actually takes anything Paul Feinbaum says seriously, you need to completely reevaluate who you are listening to and what you are taking in as a college football listener. That's all I have to say about that. Dan Lanning says they want to bring the big duck with them everywhere. All right, so if you didn't see this, the Oregon brought the big duck with them to Big Ten Media Days. And I can't play the audio because I'll get in trouble for it, but this is the big duck. They put it in the water. I tweeted about this, and immediately everybody told me that thing's getting popped, and that thing's not going to survive the Olentangy or whatever. Like, I found it hilarious that Dan Lanning wants to bring this with him, and I say go for it, man. Buy one for every single road game this year. Take it there with you. I want to see the drama. Will the duck get popped wherever they go? Where do they decide to put the duck? Because not every stadium has water around it that you could put it there. I think it's fantastic. I really am enjoying Oregon being in the Big Ten. I find them comedic, but I also find them to be a powerful enough football team that they are obviously gaining respect for the Big Ten. And overall, I mean, like, I love the feuds that it's bringing too, right? You're just bringing one more fan base in to have feuds and to argue with one another. I love it. And Dan Lanning, I mean, I love Dan Lanning as a coach. This guy is fiery. He has confidence. He speaks well. Yeah, he just really believes in himself and his team, and so I'm all for it. Great stuff by Dan Lanning. All right, a major blunder by one coach. Wasn't exactly a great situation here. So Deshaun Foster, here's what his opening statement was to the Big Ten media.
Coach Foster, welcome to the Big Ten. We'll begin with your opening statement.
How you guys doing? I'm happy to be here. Glad to be a part of this great conference. Finally putting two great emblems together, UCLA and the Big Ten. We're a school that's won, 123 championships, so this fits us being right in this conference. Football-wise, we're just excited. I'm sure you guys don't know too much about UCLA, but our football program, but we're in LA. It's us and USC. I'm just basically excited, really. That's it. Any questions?
In a second.
That makes me crack up every time. Now, Deshaun Foster later on, he owned it. I mean, give him props, give him credit. Now, I don't know if everybody saw that because that part wasn't on Big Ten TV, but I mean, or the Big Ten Network. Just what a way to enter the conference. This is a coach that people are already questioning, kind of, right? I mean, he had his supporters, former player, played in the NFL, stuff like that, but he definitely had some people that were questioning the hire. He comes in after Chip Kelly leaves for an offensive coordinator in the conference, and he talks about how put these great emblems together, and then he says, you might not know much about UCLA football. Like, okay. We're at the football media days. These are probably the people who are the most informed about your football team, around the country. So if these people don't know very much about your football program, I hate to say it, but your football program isn't well known at all. And what are you doing in the Big Ten if that's true? I think it's crazy. I'm glad UCLA is in the Big Ten, but just what an absolute crazy way to have a first opening statement. I will say later on, I went to Deshaun Foster's little interview in his press conference, and I mean, the dude was sitting back, he was smiling, he was having a good time, and he was just kind of going off the cuff with it. He wasn't as buttoned up as some of these other coaches, and it was actually refreshing. I mean, it was refreshing to have a coach who was just kind of willing to almost shoot the breeze with everybody. All these coaches, when they speak, I mean, there's tons of cameras and tons of reporters around him. When he was speaking, it was mostly just like iPhones, people asking, kind of casual but also serious questions, and he did a much better job later on when he was kind of one-on-one with people. So Deshaun Foster, I'm sure he's just one of those people that he's much better one-on-one with somebody else, and somebody probably didn't brief him well enough on what to say for his opening statement. But at the end of the day, like, just what a wild way to first introduce yourself, not just your school, but yourself to the Big Ten. Just absolutely wild. All right, Lincoln Riley. All right, so Lincoln Riley, he's asked about coming into the Big Ten, and maybe they're not a favorite. Are they a contender yet? Things like that. And here's what Lincoln Riley had to say.
Yeah, well, we are at the top of the Big Ten Conference. I mean, we're at the top of any conference. I don't ever look at ourselves below anybody, and I never will. Listen, 2 years ago, look where Ohio State and Oregon were 2 years ago. Look what they took over. Look what we took over. It takes time. I'm not a magician. I can't wave a magic wand and everything just be perfect right away. But find one area that we had to make progress. So this thing's got momentum. It's coming. Nothing's going to stop it. That's fine. They started at a different point. We'll see where it ends up.
Coach, name one area we haven't made progress. Well, Lincoln, you didn't make progress going from 11 wins the year before, 10 wins, I forget, probably 11 because you made the conference championship game, to 8 wins last year. So not really progress there, but I'll let him live. It's really interesting to hear a coach kind of come in and have this confidence. He says, we're the top of the Big Ten Conference. No, maybe historically, but right now coming in, you're not. There's an argument to pick Iowa, who got blown out and didn't score a single point in the Big Ten championship game last year. And they only got there because they were in the Big Ten West. There were 2 other teams in the conference that were for sure better than them. Oregon was for sure better than them last year. So there's 4 teams in the conference now that you could easily project to be better than Iowa. I didn't say easily. There's 3 teams in the conference you could easily project to be better. 1 you should probably project, but maybe not as much. And so USC, to say you're the top of the Big Ten Conference, you're not. You're 5th, 6th. Just absolutely crazy. I get the confidence. I get wanting to be that way, but just a crazy thing to think. All right, PJ Fleck. All right, so I don't have a video of this, but here's what happened. So PJ Fleck was talking in his press conference, and essentially what happened, and I wasn't recording, obviously, but a guy that I knew from some Oregon media, he turns over to me, and he says, is it just me, or is this guy just really impressive? And I didn't know how to respond, because as I was sitting there listening to PJ Fleck, I was thinking, yeah, PJ Fleck is a really good speaker, but he's also PJ Fleck. He's also got the row the boat, and he's kind of corny a little bit, and I don't know if I really want him, but I could totally see how, you never really experienced PJ Fleck before, and then you're like, whoa, this guy's really, really impressive. And don't get me wrong, PJ Fleck is a good football coach. He's done good things at Minnesota, but he also is not the most impressive coach in the conference. And it was just really crazy to hear an Oregon media member talk like that. I personally like Minnesota football. I've always kind of had an affinity for him. I like PJ Fleck for the most part. Find him kind of weird in a few areas, but I could definitely see how if you're listening to PJ Fleck talk for the first time, he does seem very impressive, and he is a very good public speaker. But he's honestly probably the best public speaker in the Big Ten. And there's something to be said about that. So we'll see. Maybe he will impress everybody this year in the Big Ten and Minnesota with Max Brosmer and Darius Taylor and Daniel Jackson. We'll just have this high, potent offense, and things will look really, really good. We'll see. I wouldn't bet on it to happen, but I also wouldn't be surprised if they come in and they have a good year, 8, 9 wins, something like that. Would be a good year for Minnesota. All right, final thing, and then we'll move on to one of our next 2 topics.
Schedule is always.
Sorry, I started that early. The College Football Playoff Committee continues to do whatever they want. So the College Football Playoff Executive Director, Lieutenant Richard Clark, spoke at Big Ten Media Days. So the very first speaker, the first day was Tony Petitti. The second day was Richard Clark, the College Football Playoff executive, and then the third day, nobody spoke at that time. The first coach came up at 11:30 instead of 11 o'clock, and so pretty interesting to hear him talk about the College Football Playoffs, his history, things like that. And of course, one of the first questions he gets is, "What are you going to do with strength of schedule? Is that going to be a determining factor?" Obviously, one of the Power 2 conferences is going to want that heavily considered. You don't want a 10-2 Big 12 team to get the exact same treatment as a 10-2 Big Ten team because they're going to be playing better competition. It's going to be a tougher schedule. And so here's what he had to say.
Schedule is always a key criteria for the committee, and it's written into the protocol. I mean, strength of schedule, obviously record, head-to-head competitions. There's so many things that go into this, but what we're trying not to do is tie the hands of the committee members and make it so prescriptive on how they use the different data that they have and incorporate that into their ranking. But what we do is emphasize that things like strength of schedule are very important, that it is among the top things that they have to take into consideration. And for all the reasons that you just talked about, it's going to be critical for them to take that into account. I sat in on 3 of the selection committee meetings last year, and I'll say that team operates with great sophistication. There's a lot of discussion there, and I think that they take into account the things that are most important, especially as we go into some of the changes now. They're going to recognize that these changes are happening and that strength of schedule is going to matter. So there's science in this. There's art to this. We have the eye test. We have committee members that are very smart and very in-depth in their knowledge of college football. So I think that is going to always be a top criteria, but I think they're taking it into the right I'll say level of importance when they're making their decisions. So, but
translation, the College Football Playoff Committee can just do whatever they want. We're going to give them the data, we're going to give them the papers, and they're just going to do whatever. I can't stand this. I mean, I think there has to be some more things, like you have to have some structure to this. You can't just say, here's strength of schedule, here's some PFF grades, here's some, passing stats. Like, this isn't how you pick things. And you talk about the eye test. Nobody has time to watch every single one of these games. You need representatives from the conference who say, I'm going to focus on this conference. I'm going to focus on this. We're going to figure things out, and then we're going to compare as we get closer, talk through things together. And I think at the end of the day, like, there does need to be this idea that the Big Ten Conference and the SEC are the two strongest conferences, and that needs to be considered. If you would have got up there and said, yes, strength of schedule will absolutely be considered, and the conference that you play in is definitely going to be considered, because there are other conferences, conferences that are stronger than others, which would have been completely appropriate to say at Big Ten Media Days. I mean, Matt Rule had his comments about 4 teams in the Big Ten playoff, the NFL of college football. Like, this would have been completely appropriate to say at Big Ten Media Days. And honestly, like, you're gonna piss off some Kansas fans, like. Boo-hoo, it's fine. Like, this is the reason. There's a reason why these teams are in these conferences, because they are some of the biggest teams. They are some of the biggest fan bases, and the teams that are in the SEC and the teams that are in the Big Ten are the teams that matter the most to college football. That's just the way it is. And I know that some people don't like hearing about how college football is changing, and I get it. I don't like everything that's changing too. But if we're actually just looking at the landscape of everything, and we're saying a Big Ten conference schedule is one of, if not the hardest schedules in all of college football. You are playing 9 conference games, and a lot of these teams are playing a Power 4 team outside of their conference. The SEC plays 8, and you can argue the SEC has better teams. I'm not going to argue that they don't have more talented teams, because a lot of the talent in America for college football resides down south. But when you're playing 9 conference games as opposed to the 8 that the SEC play, and many of those teams, I shouldn't say many of them, a good amount of those teams are playing FCS or a group of 5 teams in November, basically getting themselves a bye week. Like, come on. You have to heavily consider strength of schedule, and you also need to consider what conference a team is in and what kind of teams they are playing. It's just the way it is. And there needs to be more structure to that, and make sure you're taking that into account. All right, let's talk about one more guy who had some comments for his conference, and so I didn't include this in the Big Ten Media Days because he was talking outside of his conference, and this is Ohio State transfer Kyle McCord was asked at the ACC Media Days conference about the differences between the ACC and the Big Ten. Now, this question is kind of stupid because Kyle McCord has not played in the ACC yet. I had the opportunity to ask players about the differences between like the Big 12 and the Big 10. I thought about asking Dylan Gabriel about that. You know, what's the difference between the Big 12 and the Big 10? But the truth is he hasn't played in the Big 10 yet. So all you're going to get is his assumption of what the Big 10 is, which I would have the same assumption. I would assume run the ball, strong defenses, win in the trenches. Like, you know, yeah, you can get away with, you know, being kind of air raid here and there, but it's not going to guarantee you a win just because you're different. So I don't know. Like, to me, it didn't make a whole lot of sense, but, you know, whatever, the ACC media, they're looking for anything and everything to try and, you know, figure out that they're better than the Big Ten. They're not, but they're looking out for it. So here's what Kyle McCord said. All right, quote, "I know in the Big Ten, some of those teams will run the ball all game, past 10 times a game. I think quarterbacks in the ACC, in my opinion, are top notch. So I think there will be some games that might get into a little bit of a shootout this year. I think talent-wise, it's there. Again, I think it's case by case for each team." All right, so let's look a little closer at this quote, okay? He starts off by saying, "I know in the Big Ten, some of those teams will run the ball all game." Well, yes, running the ball is a strong point of the Big Ten, and it's something, newsflash, you have to do to win in college football. I mean, teams who try to air it out all the time and who hardly run the ball or who can't run the ball don't often win. I mean, you look at it percentage-wise, the team that runs the ball better wins a much higher percentage of the time. So, you know, those teams will run the ball all game. Well, yeah, they're going to run the ball all game because that's what they're good at. That's what they can do. Past 10 times a game, obviously he's referring to Michigan last year here where J.J. McCarthy threw the ball 10 times. I mean, they won that game against Penn State. So, I mean, and guess what, Kyle? Like, you were the reason why Ohio State lost to J.J. McCarthy, who was only passing the ball 10 times in a game part of last year. So, like, it's not going well for Kyle McCord, and so he's taking shots at another team that he was literally losing to. I don't see how that makes any sense. I think the quarterbacks in the ACC, in my opinion, are top notch. Oh, okay. All right. Kyle McCord says that the quarterbacks in the ACC are top notch. All right, I have a graphic here done by CFB Report, College Football Report. I think they're CFB REP on Twitter. You tell me, all right, are these quarterbacks top notch? Let's look at them. All right, number 1, Kyron Drones, Virginia Tech. The number 1 quarterback in your conference is from Virginia Tech. Cam Ward should be number 1 on this list, but I digress. Cam Ward from Washington State is your number 1 quarterback in this conference, which is just wild. Sure, Kyron Drones, number 2. Kyle McCord is number 3. Kyle McCord, who, yes, he had very good stats, but guess what? Marvin Harrison Jr. had to bail him out of every single game last year. Cade Klubnik, DJ Uyunglele, two quarterbacks that Clemson has just absolutely ruined. DJ got a little bit better at Oregon State, and now he's hoping to do better at Florida State. I think he can do better at Florida State, but we'll see. Jury's still out on him. Grayson McCall, a G5 transfer. Preston Stone, he was just in the. I mean, you literally have a team coming in from the G5 last year with your 7th best quarterback in the conference. Tyler Show, I mean, he's been playing in college football since 2018. He's what, a 7th year player? Like, Haynes King, number 9, failed Texas A&M. I mean, we can go on and on down the list here. Malik Murphy, the backup at Texas last year, is a starting QB in your league at 13th. Is Malik Murphy going to throw the ball all over your defense this next year, Kyle? I mean, to say that the ACC, there would be a much better argument that the ACC has the worst quarterbacks of the Power 4 conferences, of not any conference, but any of the Power 4 conferences in college football. To say they're top notch, that is so far off, so inaccurate. But whatever, Kyle McCord believes it. I think there will be some games that might get into a little bit of a shootout this year. If these quarterbacks are getting you into a shootout, let's bring the picture back up. If these quarterbacks are getting you into a shootout, like, that is terrible. Your defenses are awful. If these quarterbacks are carving up teams in your conference, if I wake up and hear about how Grayson McCall carved up Syracuse's defense, or they carved up Miami's defense, like, that's awful for your conference. Does anybody else see that? That is completely awful for your conference if those quarterbacks are the ones carving them up. I just know I'm going to wake up tomorrow and have some ACC fan tell me how awesome their quarterbacks are. They're not, but that's what Kyle McCord thinks. So, I couldn't disagree more. I think that running the ball and playing good defense is actually a sign of, a strong conference, but whatever. That's not what they have in the ACC. They're crumbling apart, and we'll see where all the ACC teams go here in a couple years or 2, or a couple years or 3. All right, our last subject here, Big Ten football coaches on the hot seat. All right, so BetOnline a couple weeks ago came out with their Big Ten, or with all their college football coaches who had the best odds to be the first coach fired. So they're not necessarily saying that these are the best odds to be fired, but the first coach fired in college football. Ryan Day is the first Big Ten coach. He's tied for 4th overall at plus 1,200. And I got to be honest, I don't see any Big Ten coaches being fired before the conference championship games. The other coach they had on here, Mike Locksley at 16th, and then next after that was Lincoln Riley at 17th. Mike Locksley plus 1,600, Lincoln Riley plus 2,500. I think he was tied for 17th too, but I don't see how Mike Locksley is going to get fired. There must be some betting going on here that's really affecting this, but he's not necessarily in any trouble with any scandals or anything going on. He's lost a ton of weight in the offseason. Looks better, looks much healthier. Good for him. That's awesome. And ever since 2020, Maryland has gotten better and better each year. They're 3-0 in bowl games. In 2020, they were 2-3. The year after that, 2021, they went 7-6. In 2022, they went 8-5, and then this past year, they went 8-5 again. So you could argue they stayed stagnant instead of getting better. But overall, I mean, like, Mike Locksley is doing good things at Maryland, and sometimes he gets kind of the short end of the stick. I think sometimes people kind of make fun of him a little bit. I'm certainly not going to come out here and say Mike Locksley is some fantastic, great coach, but I don't see what he's done to warrant getting fired. And I don't see the path for him to go like 0-7 or like 2-5 and get fired. They could lose to Indiana. I guess they could lose to some lower tier teams in the Big Ten, and that might make people mad. But I mean, let's be honest, Maryland fans don't care. If you make it to October, November, when they start playing basketball, Maryland fans they're going to start paying attention to basketball, and you're going to be good. Just make it till November. They'll start playing basketball, and you'll be good, because that's what Maryland fans really care about. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what they really care about. And if he keeps going to bowl games and he keeps winning bowl games, he's going to finish the year A-okay. Lincoln Riley, plus 2,500, tied for 17th. All right, so in Lincoln Riley's first full 2 seasons at USC, he is 19-8. Clay Helton in his first 2 full seasons at USC, all right, he had the one season where he played one, he coached one game. The season after that, or maybe 2 years after that, he coached in replacement of Sark, and then he got the job, and he became the full-time coach after that. Won 10 games, won 11 games, 10-3, 11-3 following that. Clay Helton went 21-6 in his first 2 full seasons at USC. And they held on to Clay Helton for a good amount of time. They didn't get rid of him right away. Lincoln Riley, I mean, he's really going to have to mess up this season if he's going to be the first head coach fired in the Big Ten or in all of college football. I mean, it's going to take a pretty massive, colossal mistake. I mean, even if he starts like 3-3 and the defense doesn't look great and Miller Moss isn't looking great, I still think people give him time. I still think they say, this is where we're at. Lincoln Riley's building things. And I don't think people realize the stuff behind the scenes that Lincoln Riley is doing to get things built and to get the program in a better spot. I mean, he talked about at Big Ten Media Days, we heard the clip, USC's kind of playing catch-up a little bit in some ways with their facilities and NIL, things like that going on behind the scenes. He's helping build those things. And in a world where you fire a coach and you could essentially lose your entire team, I don't think it's going to happen as quickly. And I don't see the possibility of Lincoln Riley being that one. Ryan Day certainly could happen. If Ryan Day loses to Iowa and Oregon, they're not going to lose to Iowa, but if something crazy like that were to happen, sure, he'd get fired. If he loses to Michigan, I don't think they fire him right after the Michigan game. If he loses, if he's 10-2, they lose to Michigan, and they're going to the college football playoffs, I don't think they fire him right then and there. I think they see what happens in the playoffs first. But you never know. You never know. Something could happen right at the end of that Michigan game if he loses, and he could be fired. I doubt that happens. I think Ohio State is a little bit better put together than that. I think the buyout is a little bit too large for that to happen, but never say never. My hot take is that even if Ryan Day loses to Michigan this year, he won't get fired. That's my hot take. The buyout is too much, and the program is in a really good spot recruiting-wise. Players are not getting in trouble. I mean, you see what's going on down in Georgia with their driving incidents and this rah-rah Thomas guy who got in trouble with, family violence or something like that. Did something to hurt kids. Like, Ohio State's in a really good spot behind the scenes right now. The NIL is going crazy. I don't think Ohio State moves on from Ryan Day. If the only thing that happens is he loses to Michigan. I think that's a narrative that people are spinning right now, and I think Ohio State fans are crazy, so they're kind of going with it. But I don't know. You tell me. If Ryan Day loses to Michigan, do they fire him on the spot? One loss of the season, or they lose to Oregon and Michigan, do they fire him right on the spot? You tell me. Love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening to the Big Ten Huddle. Remember, we have a live episode Tuesday night. I don't think Zach's going to be here this Tuesday. We'll have somebody else filling in. And then me and Kent on Wednesday night talking basketball. And then we'll have 2 more football episodes Friday morning, Saturday morning, both at 6 a.m. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We do appreciate it. Have a good one.